Well play.
All right, we're now joined by Greg Wrubell, voice of BYU Athletics, and of course their basketball team has been playing pretty well in the sledgehammer of the Big 12. We'll get to that with Greg. But Greg, overall, I know there's been talk about the BYU Utah game being early November and not later in November, but overall, what has been the reaction among BYU faithful or the university athletic department when it comes to the schedule released today?
Yeah, I think most of the obvious focus went to the BYU Utah game and where it was placed. Not a big deal for me. It's been almost 15 years since that was the last game of the year for these teams and on a regular basis. And so, and since in the interim, they've been hit and miss in terms of the schedule. They've been off each other's schedule multiple times in the last decade plus. So I'm okay with it where it is. And actually, regardless of the outcome in that game, winning team or losing team, there's a chance to still do some things after that. So it's nice in a way to maybe not have all the eggs in that basket, have everything build up to that. In this way, there's still some things to do after that game. In BYU's situation, they've got KU at home, at ASU, and then Houston at home. So whatever happens against Utah, there's still some ability to make movement late in the year after the rivalry game, which may be kind of a refreshing thing as well. You play the FCS game to open, which is pretty traditional, but then it's back-to-back away games. And in a season where BYU could have had 7 home games because they have the 5 home Big 12 games, they're playing 2 away. They opted to keep a game in Laramie on the schedule. When they went to the Big 12, they reconfigured a lot of future dates, took a lot of teams off the schedule. They kept Wyoming on the road on that schedule. So they're going to go at SMU, at Wyoming in back-to-back weeks in early September. So not everyone gives themselves 2 away games in their 3-game non-conference portion of the schedule. But BYU did that with a power conference team, albeit a new ACC team in SMU, and then a group of 5 traditional rival in Wyoming.
Greg, I know the fans are upset about not having that game, at least some of them are, not having the rivalry game and rivalry at the end of the year, that it's in the middle of the year. But does that create maybe an advantage with Houston coming in, and God knows what the weather's going to be in late November in Provo, as where you pretty much know what it's going to be in Houston?
Yeah, you take a warm weather team to the mountains on November 30th. I mean, that's anyone's guess. And so, yeah, I think BYU gets an advantage with altitude and weather with that game against that team, and a game that might mean something. Absolutely.
Greg, any history with either of the Arizona schools or Colorado? I mean, we know there's some teams in the Big 12 still searching for their rival, and here comes Utah for BYU and vice versa. But any kind of background really that's notable for those who don't follow BYU football with any of the other 3 newcomers?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, Colorado they won't see till next year. So Colorado's a 2025 thing. But of those other 3 schools, if you want to go back in the day, the old WAC, BYU, Arizona State, and Utah were all conference members of the old WAC back in the 70s. And so they started playing football against each other a long time ago. That is BYU and Arizona State. So BYU's played Arizona 25 times already, and BYU's played Arizona State 28 times. And then you go to Utah, and well, that's 95 games. So these Big 12 newcomers are pretty familiar to the Big 12 newcomers are familiar to BYU, with the exception of Colorado. Fewer games against BYU, despite the fact they're mountain border brethren. They don't play Colorado a lot, and they won't see until 25.
What about the travel with BYU, Utah, Arizona State, obviously out to the west, and then UCF has got a very long schedule on some of the road games, but they have a lot of teams that are coming a long way to go play them as well. Is there anything there that you see as a quirk when it comes to that?
Now, BYU goes by home game to Orlando with a bye. So even the one East Coast trip comes at a time that's pretty soft for BYU relative to not making back-to-back road games, certainly not making back-to-back long trips. And so the one long trip happens in a pretty good spot in the schedule. I do like the fact BYU doesn't leave the state of Utah but for once after October 26th. So from late October to the end of November, BYU leaves the state once, and it's only to go down to Tempe. So I think they got a pretty good travel schedule this year. And again, to me, the heaviest lifting comes in those back-to-back away games at SMU and at Wyoming, really off the start of the season before league play even starts.
Greg, spring football is going to open up a lot of things for BYU. I know the first season of Big 12 didn't go their way, but how kind of wide open are our position battles going to be, particularly at quarterback and everything that's going to go on there for the Cougs?
Yeah, nothing really happened at running back for BYU in the portal. And so you're looking at what they had to get better. But at quarterback, that's where news was made because Gary Bohannon came. Mm-hmm. And so that's the headline right now. Everything's going to go to quarterback because Keaton Slovis didn't play the last 4 games of 2023 due to injury. He was the big get last year, of course, right? So the Slovis thing didn't quite work out as BYU hoped it would. Jake Retzloff got a 4-game cameo at the end, but they were 4 losses. BYU faded to the finish. The Cougars were on pace to get to a bowl game at 5-2, and somehow they missed the bowl game, losing 5 in a row to end the year. The last 4 under Jake Retzloff. So Retzloff's cameo, while it had some high points, didn't result in a single win. So they went out and got a quarterback to compete with Jake Retzloff, and Gary Bohannon will be that primary competitor. So yes, there will be battles other places, but everything's going to look to quarterback because there's a real question as to who the guy is when the Cougars open the season against Southern Illinois on August 31st.
Besides the obvious, but after 2 losses, Tech and then University of Houston to win that game on Saturday against Texas, how critical was that to get that win with 2 road games coming up against West Virginia and Oklahoma?
Massive win on Saturday. And that was a game BYU trailed by 7 early, too. Texas came out banging threes. BYU wasn't taking or making a lot of threes, which is unusual for them. So it's a huge win. The Texas Tech loss was the killer because they led by 16 at halftime in Lubbock. And then to lose that game, having had such a commanding lead, and then follow that up by getting Houston to a 68-68 tie with 2 minutes to go. BYU came back from double digits twice in the second half against Houston, got it to a tie ball game, and then could not score in the final 2 minutes, had a wide open 3 for the lead with a guy that you want shooting it. So those were 2 tough losses in 2 very different ways. One where you lose a lead, and another where you're taking on a top 5 team and have them in a tie ball game in a rabid atmosphere and don't finish it off. So off 2 tough losses to beat Texas the way they did meant everything. You get back you're back in the mix. 3-4 and 2-5 feels like a big difference here in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And then we saw how well Texas played last night, right? I mean, they're leading Houston by 6 late, and it looks like, okay, Texas is on top of this thing. And then those back-to-back threes by Houston just flipped the game. That said, it goes to overtime, but Texas is clearly a good team, and that's a good win for BYU because the Longhorns had won back-to-back ranked games going into the BYU game. So, really big for BYU. And now the bye comes at a really good time. This is their 1 midweek bye. A lot of guys to rest up and get healthy. Morgantown's going to be no joke, though. I know everyone looks at West Virginia right now as kind of a get, but I mean, Kansas and Texas probably thought the same thing, and that didn't work out for them. So West Virginia's got their guys back. They're all together now. I think it's going to be a really, really tough game to win, despite the fact West Virginia is where it is in the standings.
All right, so I text you. I was at the Baylor-TCU game that went forever and ever and ever. Great win for the Frogs. About the T-shirts and the students. Just to clarify what happened, because a lot of people saw that there was the post by Mitch Harper, and the next thing you know, those T-shirts are gone, and everybody immediately likes to point the finger at Texas, and there's some of that that's deservedly so. But you made the comment that, no, this was something BYU asked him to do. Did you even know that was a thing before you got my text?
Yeah, no, I saw the shirts in the front row before the game, and BYU, I think, was a better safe than sorry situation. They just didn't want to have anything, become something. And as a result, either way, it's a story, right? Whether they're there or they get taken off, the fact they were presented visually, it became a story. But I think BYU just wanted it to not be a bigger thing than it might already be. And there was no, brush back or fight back from the students. It was just a thing that kind of came and went. And, I don't think it's a huge deal. It's just in the timing of everything. I think BYU wanted to make sure it didn't become something more than it was initially. And it was something BYU wanted to kind of head off at the pass and just not have it be a deal. And I'm sure Texas wouldn't have raised a big ruckus about it either. But I think they wanted to, be overly sensitive. And they even took some heat for that, right? This is all good. It's good, clean fun. It's not obscene. It's not offensive. It's just, students being students. But I totally understand both sides of the coin, and not surprised at all that BYU kind of wanted to extinguish it before it became anything big.
Thanks for your time, Greg. Good luck the rest of the way. Enjoy a little bit of a break. And then BYU, as you mentioned, on the road the next couple of games, winning on Saturday against Texas and appreciate his time. The voice of BYU Athletics, Greg Wrubell, with us on 365 Sports.